Welcome to our channel, Auburn Chronicles. If you enjoyed rural stories, like and subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments what time it is and where you're watching from. And now, Adam will take us into today's story.
In November of 2008, a Case IH regional dealer network in central Iowa made a decision that seemed minor at the time. They adjusted their parts markup policy across all 7 of their locations, increasing margins by an average of 18% on high-turnover maintenance items: filters, belts, hydraulic hoses, bearings. The corporate directive came down from the ownership group in Des Moines with a simple justification. Market conditions allowed it, competitors were doing it, and farmers would pay because they had no choice during breakdowns. One parts manager, a man named Leonard Weitz, who had worked at the Marshalltown location for 31 years, sent a memo to corporate warning that this would backfire. He said the farmers in his territory were already stretched thin, that they were watching every dollar, and that loyalty only lasted as long as they felt respected. The memo was acknowledged, it was filed, and it was ignored. By the spring of 2009, 27 farms in a 4-county area had quietly stopped doing business with the dealer network. They did not announce it, they did not make a scene, they just stopped coming. And Leonard Weitz, who had spent 3 decades building relationships that the corporation destroyed in a single policy change, retired early and never spoke to his former employer again. This is the story of what happened when a dealership forgot that farming is a community, not a customer base. And when you break trust with a community, you do not lose sales. You lose generations. If you are watching this, you already understand that relationships in rural America are not transactional. They are built slowly, over decades, through handshakes and kept promises, and showing up when it matters. This channel exists to preserve the stories of what happens when corporations forget that, and what it costs when farmers remember. If these stories matter to you, subscribe, because the lessons here are not about parts markups. They are about respect and what happens when you run out of it. The Case IH dealer network in central Iowa had been family-owned until 2006. It started as a single location in Marshalltown in 1967, founded by a man named Carl Osterman, who had grown up on a dairy farm and understood what farmers needed: honest pricing, fast parts availability, and service that did not quit at 5 o'clock during planting or harvest. Carl ran the business that way for 38 years. He hired people who knew farming, paid them well, and gave them the authority to make decisions that put the customer first. By the time he retired in 2005, the business had grown to 7 locations across 4 counties, and it had a reputation for being the kind of dealership you could trust. Carl sold the business in 2006 to a regional agricultural equipment investment group based in Des Moines. The group owned 12 dealerships across Iowa and Nebraska, covering multiple brands: Case IH, New Holland, John Deere. They kept Carl's name on the buildings for the first year. Then they quietly rebranded everything under a corporate umbrella name: Heartland Ag Solutions. They kept most of the staff, they kept the locations, but they did not keep the philosophy. Leonard Weitz had been hired by Carl Osterman in 1977 as a parts counter employee at the Marshalltown location. He was 23 years old, fresh out of a 2-year technical program, and he knew inventory systems better than he knew people. But Carl had taught him something important: that selling parts was not about moving product. It was about keeping farmers running. If a farmer came in during harvest with a broken combine and needed a part immediately, you did not check the computer and tell him it would be 3 days. You called every other dealership in the state, found the part, and had it there by morning, even if it cost you margin, even if it meant staying late, because that farmer would remember, and so would every farmer he talked to. Leonard had built his career on that principle. By 2008, he was the parts manager at Marshalltown. He knew his inventory better than anyone. He knew which farmers ran which equipment. He knew their maintenance schedules. He knew who would need what before they did. And he knew, within about 10 seconds of a farmer walking through the door, whether they were there for routine maintenance or because something had broken at the worst possible time. The farmers knew him too. They knew Leonard would shoot straight with them. If a part was overpriced, he would tell them. If there was a cheaper alternative that would work just as well, he would offer it. If they were short on cash, he would work something out, delay the invoice, let them pay after harvest, whatever it took to keep them running. That was not official policy. That was just Leonard. And Carl had never stopped him, because Carl understood that trust was worth more than margin. But Carl was gone, and Heartland Ag Solutions did not operate that way. The new ownership had brought in corporate managers who had never farmed, never lived in a small town, and never had to look a customer in the eye after charging them double for a part they needed to survive. They ran the business from spreadsheets. They tracked metrics. They optimized pricing models. And in late 2008, after analyzing 2 years of sales data, they identified an opportunity. Parts margins were lower than industry benchmarks. Farmers were price sensitive, but they were also captive. If a combine broke down in the middle of harvest, the farmer was not going to drive 2 hours to save $15 on a filter. He was going to pay whatever it cost to get back in the field. The corporation decided to test that theory. In November 2008, Heartland Ag Solutions rolled out a new parts pricing structure across all 7 Case IH locations. Markup on high-turnover maintenance parts increased by an average of 18%. Oil filters that had sold for $12 now sold for $0.15. Hydraulic hoses that had been $48 were now $56.65. Fuel filters, air filters, belts, bearings, everything that farmers bought regularly, everything that broke at the worst possible time, went up, not by enough to cause outrage, just enough to add up. Leonard Weitz was in the meeting when the policy was announced. He sat in a conference room in Des Moines with 6 other parts managers and 3 corporate executives, and he listened to a presentation about margin optimization and competitive positioning and revenue growth targets. When the presentation ended, the executives asked if there were any questions. Leonard raised his hand. He said he understood the business rationale, but he thought it was a mistake. He said the farmers in his territory were not doing well. Corn prices had dropped, input costs were rising, a lot of them were operating on thin margins, and they were watching every expense. He said an 18% increase might not sound like much on a single part, but over the course of a year, across all the maintenance they did, it would add up to real money. And when farmers started feeling like they were being taken advantage of, they did not complain. They just left. One of the executives, a man in his mid-30s, wearing a tie that looked like it cost more than Leonard made in a week, thanked him for the input. He said they had run the numbers, and the data showed that price elasticity in the parts sector was low. Farmers would adjust. They always did. Leonard said he did not think that was true. The executive smiled and said they would monitor the results closely. Leonard went back to Marshalltown and did what he had done for 31 years. He served the farmers who came through his door. But now, every time he rang up a sale, he saw them notice the price. They did not say anything. They just paused for a half second when he told them the total, and then they paid. Some of them asked if the price was right. Leonard said it was. Some of them asked if it had gone up. Leonard said it had. None of them argued. They just paid and left. But Leonard started keeping a list. Not an official list. Just a mental tally of the farmers who used to come in twice a week and now came in once. The ones who used to buy filters in bulk and now bought them one at a time. The ones who started asking if he had used parts available. It was small stuff. Behavioral changes that would not show up in a monthly sales report. But Leonard noticed, and he knew what it meant. By February of 2009, Leonard had seen enough. He sat down and wrote a memo to corporate. He laid out what he was seeing: declining frequency of visits, smaller order sizes, more questions about pricing, more farmers asking about alternatives. He included specific examples. He did not name names, but he described patterns. He said the price increase was eroding trust, and trust was the only reason farmers stayed loyal to a dealership when cheaper options existed 30 miles away. He said they should consider rolling back the increase, or at least freezing it before they lost customers they would never get back. He sent the memo in early March. He received a response 2 weeks later. It thanked him for his diligence, acknowledged his concerns, and informed him that sales data across the network did not support his observations. Revenue was up, margin was up, the policy was working as intended. No changes would be made. Leonard read the email twice. Then he printed it, filed it, and went back to work. He did not write another memo. He just watched. In April of 2009, a farmer named Russell Tompkins came into the Marshalltown location needing a hydraulic hose for his Case IH 2388 combine. It was a standard part. Leonard had sold dozens of them over the years. The price used to be $48. Now it was $56.65. Russell paid without comment, took the hose, and left. Leonard did not think much of it at the time. Russell had been a customer for 18 years. He came in regularly. He was steady business. Russell never came back. Leonard did not notice for a while. April and May were busy. Planting season. Lots of farmers in and out, needing parts, needing service, needing advice. But in June, when things slowed down, Leonard realized he had not seen Russell in over a month. He checked the sales records. Nothing since the hydraulic hose in April. He thought about calling, but he did not. If Russell had switched dealerships, a phone call was not going to bring him back. What Leonard did not know was that Russell had not just switched dealerships. He had driven to a farm supply co-op in Waterloo, 43 miles away, and bought the exact same hydraulic hose for $41. The co-op did not carry as much inventory as the dealership, and their service department was not as good, but their parts were 20 to 30% cheaper on average. Russell had done the math. If he bought all his maintenance parts at the co-op instead of the dealership, he would save around $1,800 a year. That was real money. Money he could not afford to leave on the table just because he liked Leonard. Russell was not the only one doing that math. By the summer of 2009, Leonard had started noticing a pattern. Customers he had known for years were coming in less frequently. Some of them stopped coming in at all. When he ran the numbers, parts sales at his location were down 11% compared to the same period in 2008. But corporate did not see it that way. They saw that revenue per transaction was up, which meant margin was up, which meant the policy was working. They did not care that fewer farmers were walking through the door. They cared that the ones who did were paying more. Leonard tried to explain this in a staff meeting. He said they were losing customers and revenue might be up now, but it would not stay up if the customer base kept shrinking. The regional manager, a man named Todd Vickers, who had been with Heartland for less than a year, said that customer churn was normal. Some customers leave. New customers come in. The business adapts. Leonard said that was not how it worked in a farming community. Once you lose a farmer's trust, you do not get it back. And if you lose enough of them, there are no new customers. There are just fewer people who remember when you used to be worth trusting. Todd thanked him for his perspective and moved on to the next agenda item. In August of 2009, Leonard was restocking shelves when he overheard two farmers talking in the parking lot. He did not mean to eavesdrop, but the door was open and voices carried. One of them was a man named Dale Hibbert, who farmed about 900 acres south of Marshalltown. Dale was telling the other farmer, Leonard did not recognize him, that he had stopped buying parts at Heartland. He said the prices had gotten ridiculous, and he was not going to keep paying a premium just because it was convenient. He said he had found a guy in Ames who sold aftermarket parts at half the price, and if the dealership wanted his business back, they were going to have to earn it. The other farmer agreed. He said he had started doing the same thing. Leonard did not say anything. He just kept stocking shelves. But that night, he went home and told his wife he thought the dealership was in trouble. She asked why. He said because farmers were not mad. They were not yelling or complaining or demanding better prices. They were just leaving, quietly, without drama. And that was worse, because when farmers get loud, you can fix it. When they go quiet, it is already over. By the fall of 2009, parts sales at the Marshalltown location were down 18% year over year. Corporate attributed it to the economy. Leonard knew better. He knew exactly what was happening because he was the one standing at the counter watching it happen. Farmers were still coming in for emergency parts, the things they needed immediately and could not get anywhere else. But they had stopped coming in for routine maintenance. They were buying filters and belts and hoses somewhere else, somewhere cheaper. And once they started doing that, they did not come back. In October, Leonard requested a meeting with regional management. He brought a detailed report showing customer visit frequency, average transaction size, and year-over-year trends. He showed them that they were not losing revenue per transaction. They were losing transactions. He showed them a list of customers who had not come in for over 6 months, customers who used to come in every week. He told them, as clearly as he could, that the parts pricing policy was killing long-term customer relationships, and if they did not reverse it, they were going to lose an entire generation of farmers. Todd Vickers listened. He thanked Leonard for the analysis. He said he would take it under advisement. 2 weeks later, Leonard received an email informing him that corporate had reviewed the data and determined that the Marshalltown location's decline in parts sales was an isolated issue, likely related to local economic conditions and not indicative of a systemic problem. The pricing policy would remain in place. Leonard printed the email. He put it in a folder with the previous memo and response, and then he made a decision. He was 61 years old. He had been planning to work until he was 65, maybe longer. But he was tired of fighting a corporation that did not listen, tired of watching relationships he had built over 30 years fall apart because someone in Des Moines thought an 18% margin increase was worth more than trust. He submitted his retirement paperwork in November of 2009. His last day was December 31st. He did not make a speech. He did not send a farewell email. He just cleaned out his office, turned in his keys, and left. What Leonard did not know, what corporate did not know, was how many farmers had quietly made the same decision he had. Not to retire, just to leave. In January of 2010, a man named Gerald Foss, who ran a grain farming operation near Traer, sat down with his son and told him they were switching dealerships. They had been doing business with Heartland for 14 years. But over the past year, Gerald had watched his parts costs climb while his revenue stayed flat, and he was done. They were moving their business to a smaller independent Case IH dealer in Tama, 22 miles away. The prices were better. The service was more personal. And Gerald did not feel like he was being taken advantage of every time he walked through the door. Gerald's son asked if they should tell Heartland they were leaving. Gerald said no. There was nothing to say. They just stopped going. That same month, a farmer named Clayton Wirtz made the same decision. Then a farmer named Eugene Packard. Then 2 brothers named Dell and Howard Stenzel who farmed together. By the spring of 2010, 27 farms across a 4-county area had stopped doing business with Heartland Ag Solutions. Not all at once, not in protest, just quietly, one by one, as they found alternatives that made them feel less like they were being extracted from and more like they were being served. Corporate did not notice, or if they did not care, because revenue was still up, margin was still strong, the spreadsheet looked good, and the spreadsheet was all that mattered. By 2011, the Marshalltown location had gone through 3 parts managers in 18 months. None of them lasted. The ones who cared burned out trying to explain to corporate why customer relationships mattered. The ones who did not care just processed orders and watched the foot traffic decline. In 2012, Heartland closed the Marshalltown location and consolidated operations into their Waterloo facility. They cited underperformance and market conditions. They did not mention that they had lost a customer base they had spent 40 years building. Leonard Weitz heard about the closure from a former coworker. He was not surprised. He had seen it coming 3 years earlier, standing at the parts counter, watching farmers pause when he told them the total. He had tried to warn them. He had written it down. He had put it in a memo, and they had ignored him. Because the memo was not data. It was just the observation of a man who had worked with farmers for 31 years and understood something that spreadsheets never would, that loyalty is not a renewable resource. Once you spend it, it is gone. The 27 farms that left Heartland in 2009 and 2010 did not come back, not when the Marshalltown location closed, not when corporate tried to win them back with promotional pricing in 2013. Not ever, because they had learned what Leonard already knew. that when a business stops valuing your loyalty, the only rational response is to stop giving it. Some of those farms are still operating today. They do business with smaller independent dealers, farm co-ops, online parts suppliers. Some of them drive farther for parts than they used to. Some of them pay a little more, but they do not feel disrespected. And in a relationship economy, that matters more than convenience. Russell Tompkins, the farmer who bought the hydraulic hose in April of 2009 and never came back, is still farming. He is 71 now. He still buys his parts from the co-op in Waterloo. He still remembers the day he realized that the dealership he had trusted for 18 years valued his money more than his business. He does not talk about it much. There is nothing to say. He just moved on. The way farmers do. Gerald Foss retired in 2018 and passed the farm to his son. The son still does business with the independent dealer in Tama. He has never set foot in a Heartland Ag Solutions location. He does not know Leonard White's. He does not know about the memo. He just knows that his father taught him to do business with people who treat you with respect, and that lesson has served him well. Leonard White's is 76 years old now. He lives in Marshalltown. He still drives past the building where he used to work. It is a storage facility now. The Case IH sign is gone. The parking lot is empty. He does not feel vindicated. He just feels sad, because he spent 31 years building something that mattered, and it took a corporation less than 3 years to destroy it. He still has the folder, the one with the memos and the email responses. He has never shown it to anyone. There is no reason to. It does not prove anything that needs proving. It just documents what happens when people who understand farming try to warn people who only understand profit margins, and what happens when the warning is ignored. In 2015, Heartland Ag Solutions sold their remaining Iowa Case IH locations to another regional investment group. The new owners rebranded again, brought in new management, and tried to rebuild customer relationships that had been shattered years earlier. Some of it worked, some of it did not, but the 27 farms that left in 2009 and 2010 never came back. Because once trust is gone, no amount of rebranding brings it back. The parts pricing policy that caused all of this was quietly rolled back in 2014 after 6 years of declining foot traffic and customer attrition that corporate finally could not ignore. The rollback was not announced. It was not apologized for. It just appeared in an internal memo that acknowledged market pressures and competitive dynamics. The memo did not mention the farmers who had left. It did not mention Leonard White's. It just said that effective immediately, parts margins would be reduced to align with regional benchmarks. By then, it did not matter. The damage was done. There is a lesson in this story that corporations never seem to learn, that farming is not a retail business. It is a relationship business. Farmers do not buy parts. They buy trust. They buy the confidence that when something breaks at the worst possible time, the person on the other side of the counter will do everything they can to get them back in the field. And when you break that trust, when you prioritize margin over relationship, when you ignore warnings from the people who know your customers best, when you treat loyalty as a data point instead of a bond, you do not just lose a sale. You lose a generation. Leonard White's knew that in 2008. He put it in writing. He sent it up the chain, and he was ignored. Not because he was wrong, but because the people making the decisions did not care if he was right. They cared about quarterly margins and revenue growth and investor returns. And by the time they realized their mistake, the farmers were gone. Quietly, without drama. The way farmers leave. 27 farms in 4 counties. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in lifetime customer value. Decades of relationships built on handshakes and kept promises. All of it gone. Not because of a catastrophic failure, not because of a scandal, but because someone in a conference room in Des Moines looked at a spreadsheet and decided that an 18% margin increase was worth more than the trust of people who had been loyal for 40 years. It was not worth it. But by the time they figured that out, there was no one left to tell.